Members, a quorum is present. A quorum is present in the assembly. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. The day's prayer will be offered by our guest chaplain, Assembly Member Rich Gordon. Mr. Gordon.
Lord, in the work that we do in this place, we are constantly surrounded by people, and yet we are very much alone. Each decision, each vote is ours, alone. We make ourselves vulnerable to public praise or public criticism. Our motives may be misunderstood, our principles challenged, and even our personhood maligned. Help us to accept that even in our loneliness, you do not leave us alone. You are with us. Because we are vulnerable, help us also to be kind and gentle and understanding of each other. May each of us be a mirror that reflects our humanity back to all with whom we share this time and this place. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Cooley as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Cooley.
Colleagues, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chambers, Sacramento, Wednesday, September 2nd, 2015. The Assembly met at 10 a.m. Honorable Kevin Mullen, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dotson Wilson at the desk. Reading Clerk Kathleen M. Lewis reading. The roll was called. Assemblymember Christina Garcia moved to quorum called the Assembly. Motion carried. Time 10 a.m. The Speaker Pro Tem.
Mr. Holden moves and Ms. Waldron seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Moving to motions and resolutions. The absences for the day. There are no absences today. Mr. Holden, you are recognized for your procedural motions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 118 and allow Assemblymember Cooley and Levine to have guests and photographers on the floor today.
Without objection, that request is granted.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 and allow Assemblymember Gray, Irwin, Levine, Ridley Thomas, and Wood to speak on adjourned in memory today.
Without objection, the request is granted. Members, pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I am re-referring the following bills to committee. File Item 39, AB 1164, Gatto to the Local Government Committee. And File Item 62, that's AB 1295, to the Governmental Organization Committee. Mr. Holden, you are recognized.
At the request of the author, please return file item 8, AB 1052 Cooley, to the Senate for further action.
Without objection, such shall be the order.
At the request of the author, please send the following bill to the inactive file, item 77, Senate Bill 556 De Leon, and file item 80, SB 187 Hall.
Without objection, the clerk will note. Is there any objection to granting Mr. Bloom unanimous consent for reconsideration on file item 75, SB 308, Wachowski, for purposes of sending the measure to the inactive file? Seeing and hearing none, reconsideration is granted. File item 75, SB 308, is ordered to the inactive file. Members, we have special guests with us today. Members. On behalf of Assemblymember Cooley, we welcome his wife, Sydney Elizabeth Cooley. Sunday, September 12th, is the Cooley's 40th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren are in the rear of the chamber. Let's welcome all of them to the floor today. Members, if I could have your attention, a couple of announcements. Today and tomorrow, concurrence bills may be taken up without the one-day waiting period. Also, no reconsideration is in order on the last two legislative days preceding the interim recess on bills that pass. Members, I also wanted to make note that there are about 20 bills on the Senate floor without floor managers. If you want your bill taken up, please assign a senator to jockey the bill on your behalf on the Senate floor. We will recess the regular session for the purpose of convening the first extraordinary session. Without objection, we will substitute the prayer, pledge, and other opening procedures in the regular session for those items in the first extraordinary session. Members, we are moving to file item number 1. That's AB 3. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 3 by Assemblymember Frazier and others, an act relating to transportation.
Members, if we could have your attention. Please give your attention to Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is the last procedural vote needed to establish a conference committee to continue our work on transportation. Therefore, I ask for a no vote so that we can non-concur with the Senate amendments. And I respectfully ask for your no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier is asking all members for a no vote on this item. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote. Mr. Frazier is asking for a no vote. The clerk will close the roll. Ayes 1, noes 47. The Senate amendments are not concurred in. The first extraordinary session is recessed under call of the Speaker. We will now move to convening the second extraordinary session. Without objection, we will substitute the prayer, pledge, and other opening procedures in the regular session for those items in the second extraordinary session. Mr. Holden, you are recognized for your procedural motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 77 and allow AB 1 Bonta to be taken up today without one-day wait.
Without objection, that request is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Second reading. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11.
Members, we are going to move to file item number 6. That's AB1. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1 by Assemblymember Bonta, an act relating to social services.
Mr. Bonta, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, listen closely here. I'm asking for your no vote on this measure. I'm asking for your no vote on this bill. You did hear that correctly. Your no vote, please, on this bill. This no vote on this bill is strictly a procedural vote to refuse concurrence on the Senate amendments. By doing so, we're giving ourselves the option of a possible conference committee for the second special session. And not to add to your confusion, but while I'm asking for your no vote, please do not be confused by my I vote and the I vote of Ms. Bonilla, which is another procedural move. The Senate is also refusing concurrence on SBX 2 Hernandez, a bill that we voted out yesterday. And thank you, members. I respectfully ask for your no vote.
Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, Mr. Bonta is asking for your no vote. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Bonta is asking for a no vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Brian. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 2, noes 48. Senate amendments are not concurred in. Members, the second extraordinary session is recessed under call of the Speaker. Members, we are moving to business on the daily file. Second reading. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 249, 327, 637 with amendments, 27 with amendments, 36, 4 with amendments, and 145 with amendments.
All right, members, we are on the concurrence file. Going to pass and retain on file item number 8. We're moving to file item number 9. That is file item number 9, AB 30. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 30 by Assemblymember Alejo and others, enact relating to schools.
Mr. Alejo, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 30, the California Racial Mascots Act, is back for concurrence with technical and clarifying amendments being taken in the Senate. AB 30 will phase out the use of the derogatory racial slur, the R word, as a school name, mascot, or nickname. The measure is part of a national movement to get rid of the use of the R word, which started almost 50 years ago by the National Congress of American Indians. And it's only proper that California do so because California is a state with the largest Native American population. For far too long, we have allowed stereotypes and derogatory terms to become normalized to our younger generations. And allowing hurtful stereotypes to be promoted and normalized is damaging to Native American heritage and certainly to Native youth. I carried this bill after meeting a young, remarkable Native American young leader, 16-year-old, who I met outside this Capitol last September, Dakota Kicking Bear Brown, who was gathering signatures asking the public to support phasing out the use of Native American mascots. And I promised him that day that we would work on this bill together to make this a reality in California. And let me remind you that the R word was once used to describe Native American scalps sold for bounty at a time when our state condoned the killing of Native peoples. Such terms have no business being used as a mascot in our public schools or otherwise. And last year, this legislature approved with bipartisan support my ACR 168 to urge the Washington NFL football team to also change its mascot. This year, AB 30 has received strong bipartisan support in both the Senate Education Committee and on the Senate floor, and it is time for we as a state to do what is right and phase out these mascots in our public schools, just like other schools have done already. The remaining schools will be able to build school pride around a new mascot, just like others have already done. Native Americans, members, are people. They are not mascots. And lastly, I want to recognize the hard work of former Assemblymember Jackie Goldberg, who last carried this bill 10 years ago. And I picked up where she left off. But it's time to have this bill signed into law, and California to be the first to enact such legislation through a bill. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on this important measure.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Mr. Harper, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in recognition of the point that this is a discussion that should be had at the school board level. The folks who should have a final say in terms of a mascot should be our local elected officials, and we should show them that respect, and I urge a no vote.
Seeing no additional discussion on the item, Mr. Alejo, you may close.
Just in response to my colleague who wears many hats, other state boards of education have enacted similar policy, including the state of Washington. But when the state provides over half our state budget to our public schools, we as state legislators certainly have a say in making sure that we're not creating a hostile environment for Native American youth. This is the right thing to do, and this is the year to do it. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. With that, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 54, noes 8. The Senate amendments are concurred in. File item number 10, we are going to pass temporarily. File item 11. We are going to take up file item 11. That's AB 990. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 990 by Assemblymember Bonilla and others, an act relating to the Political Reform Act of 1974, declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Ms. Bonilla, you may open.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker and members. This does require 54 votes, so I do hope that you'll be paying attention. I think you all know as candidates, one of the most important relationships we have is the one that we develop with the voters. We spend often years cultivating those relationships and building trust. We put our reputation and our character on the line when we're running for public office. What we have found is with the increasing amount of outside money and independent expenditures, that many things are attributed to the candidate that are actually being funded by an independent expenditure. Currently, the disclosure that's required on mail is so tiny that you can hardly read it. I was so disturbed in my last election when I actually had close friends of mine come up to me and say, "How could you have sent such a horrible piece of mail against your opponent?" And I said, "I didn't send it." And they're like, "Well, it looks like it came from you." And I'd say, "Well, look at the return address or try to find who sent it." But people really have a difficult time. What this bill will do is it will change that. It will put a much larger, bold disclosure on the mail, right under the mailing address to your constituent. And it will say, this advertisement was not authorized or paid for by a candidate or the office of a candidate for this or by a committee controlled by a candidate for this office. It has to be in 14-point font, bold text. The statement is in a box and in a contrasting color. I really believe that as we see more and more of our voters feeling disenfranchised, as we see that they are actually not even bothering to vote, are becoming increasingly frustrated because they can't sort out all these confusing messages, that this is going to help our relationship with them and the voters take control and understand where the mail, where the message is truly coming from. There was a recent election last November in Los Angeles where one home received 200 pieces of mail. That's just a phenomenal, overwhelming amount of mail. And we just see this is going to be increasing. It's not decreasing. And so my hope is that you'll join me, all of you Republicans and Democrats, as candidates to help our voters. Help our voters understand what our message is and that these other messages are from outside sources. I'm pleased to say that I've had bipartisan support in the Senate. We had 6 Republican senators vote for this bill. And I'll tell you, you can probably look at the races they had, and if you've kind of been the victim of this overwhelming expenditure of money, you're very likely to enthusiastically support this effort. With that, I would ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Say 2/3 vote, members. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 55, noes 5 on the urgency. Ayes 55, noes 5 on the measure. Senate amendments are concurred in. We're going to pass temporarily on file item number 12. Moving to file item number 13, that's AB 1060. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1060 by Assemblymember Bonilla, an act relating to cancer.
Ms. Bonilla, you may again open.
I'm on a roll, so I hope this goes well. Also, thank you, Mr. Speakers and members. AB 1060 is here for concurrence in Senate amendments. It establishes the Cancer Clinical Trials Foundation to increase access to cancer clinical trials for all patients. Right now, currently less than 1% of eligible cancer patients participate in clinical trials in the state of California. We have found that our underrepresented communities are even less likely to participate, and we believe this foundation is going to help connect our cancer patients with necessary clinical trials. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 62, noes 4. Senate amendments are concurred in. We are going to pass temporarily on file item number 14. Pass and retain on file item 18. We're moving to file item 16, AB 141. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 141 by Assemblymember Bonilla, enact relating to teacher credentialing.
Ms. Bonilla.
I am presenting now AB 141, again for concurrence in Senate amendments. The Senate amendments remove ties to federal Title II funding and narrow the bill to align with recommendations made by the Teacher Credentialing Commission. This is the bill that says that brand new teachers shouldn't be responsible to pay for their own new teacher training. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 54, noes 9. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 17 is AB 177. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 177 by Assemblymember Bonilla and others, enact relating to professions and vocations, making appropriation therefore.
Ms. Bonilla, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. AB 177 is back for concurrence, which is a sunset extension bill for the Board of Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists, the Architects Board, and Landscape Architects Technical Committee. The Senate amendments allow the Architects Board to let students enrolled in an additional path to architectural licensing program take the national examination early and it makes other technical and clarifying amendments. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 69, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 18 is AB 180. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 180 by Assemblymember Bonilla and others, enact relating to professions and vocations, making appropriation therefore.
Ms. Bonilla, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. AB 180 is also back for concurrence. The amendments taken in the Senate merge the funeral directors and embalmers law and the cemetery law into the Cemetery and Funeral Act, and they merge the separate funds into the renamed Cemetery and Funeral Fund to increase the fiscal solvency of the board. Thank you very much, of the fund. Thank you, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Seeing no discussion on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. We are going to pass temporarily on file item 19. File item 20, AB 288. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 288 by Assemblymember Holden and others, enact relating to public schools.
Mr. Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Assembly Bill 288 is back from the Senate with amendments making clarifying changes to reduce general fund costs. Let me just tell you that this is a very important bill because it does create and expand pathways for our high school students to look at taking college courses while they're in high school, creating opportunity for vocational opportunities, education to be presented to them. This is a game changer for our young people. I ask for your aye vote in Senate amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Ms. Olson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I, too, rise as the joint author of AB 288 to urge its passage. We've been working on this for 2 years, and we're really excited that we've gotten it to this point. It's a game changer for our kids, as Assemblymember Holden said. Urge and aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 71, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 21, AB 388. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 388 by Assemblymember Chang and others, enact relating to housing.
Ms. Chang, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my bill is fabulous, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no discussion or debate on the item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. We are going back to Madam Speaker's items.